I think this is a really fascinating topic, and like James, I was reflecting um, on some thoughts around how things have changed, I suppose, over the last decade or so. And I think there's some really interesting transitions that we're seeing, particularly around the way that professional firm leaders think about data and how they use data in their business. So I think the most obvious one is running from or transitioning from a relatively data poor organization to a data rich one. So we know that professional firms are getting much more high quality data, bigger volumes of data, but I think that brings challenges in terms of how you unpack that and drive insight from it. I think another interesting trend that certainly I've seen, reflecting on what James was saying there, is that firms are moving from being in a position of kind of data agnostic. So how important is data around that boardroom table, as James was saying, to actually being much more data inquisitive, knowing that actually data needs to be at the heart of decision making. And I think a really interesting other shift that we're seeing is from a position of being data siloed, where there's lots of different sources of data and insights sitting in pockets across the firm, to being much more data integrated, much more able to look across different data sets to really understand what's going on within the business and within the wider sector in which they operate. And I think it's really interesting that this has obviously happened at a time when big advances in technology have made smart data analytics much more accessible to everybody, but also at a time when lots of professional firms themselves have been integrating data services into their own business model in terms of the services that they provide to clients and how they work with clients. And I think this is an area that touches multiple areas of management. So particularly the areas that I spend a lot of my time working with firms on, things like client experience, business development, strategy. Think about some of the big strategic questions facing firms at the moment. Where do we invest? Which kinds of client segments are going to drive the most future growth for the firm? These are all questions where, okay, firm leaders generally have, good intuition. They have a kind of good gut feel about maybe what's happening within their firm. But, I would argue that today is not really sufficient basis on which to make decisions, particularly for, complex decisions about how are markets changing, how do clients think about your firm in relation to competitors. And if these decisions are taken in the absence of data, then I think, as Richard alluded to at the start, it becomes much more anecdotal. You're reliant on what you hear. You're reliant on those who are shouting loudest with their point of view, probably having the most influence on decisions. You're reliant on the kind of the politics of the firm to take hold. And I think the other point I'd make is it's more difficult for firms or leaders within firms to create the impetus for change without really clear, reliable evidence. So, how can you build that evidence? And I think, here, I think what, certainly what I see in the work that I do, some of the work that we've done in the last couple of years with B2B businesses, particularly those who are, PE or VC backed, very good at taking a broad analysis of the market, bringing in lots of different data sources. So not just, the financials, not just the financials of the business, but looking at those key client segments at a product level, at a service level, what's really driving growth? How does that benchmark against competitors? Really drilling into the client experience data. And again, that can be kind of anecdotal, looking at client reviews, but looking at, at the client data across the board, what's on the mind of your clients, their businesses, how are their needs changing? What data can you get from kind of marketing, software systems, etc.? Where's interest being driven in terms of your content, your websites? What insight and data can you get around from employees? What are they seeing from the market? How are they using their time? And other operational data across the firm. So I think a number of kind of trends are coming together, and I think there's probably three kind of key lessons I think to derive from this in the last minute or so that I've got. I think one is, we can sit in a bath of data and not be any clear about the direction forward. I think therefore what we need to do is have a clear sense of the questions that you want to answer using data. Avoid that analysis paralysis to really focus in on the change that you want to drive through. I think the second is looking for those opportunities to bring different data sources together. So I think the richness of combining multiple proof points and technology obviously makes it a lot easier to do that now. And then I think third is really driving through not just data. Data is a route to insight, but actually really thinking through what's the implication of the data that we're collecting, what's the kind of strategic impetus that we want to make off the back of that. So I think some big shifts happening, really exciting time to be in this space, and I think lots of kind of opportunities for firms to make smarter decisions about what the future looks like for them.